Okay. All right, we're going to talk about today contracting methods and alternative project delivery methods. What basically that is so the AIA we've talked about, and we're going to go over, after break, we'll go over the A201. Project delivery methods, the concept is how are they going to be paid for? And how are the teams set up? So you can have like a lump sum contract where a lot of times I give you the example, the contractor's going to build that house for you for $1 million. Or another one concept is the cost of the work. The contractor is going to bill you for every receipt or invoice they get from a subcontractor. They're going to take that actual invoice and they're going to show it to you, and then they're going to charge a markup or a percentage for their overhead and profit. So that's a cost plus agreement. So that's one model of how they contract with you. And different projects call for different types of delivery models as far as payment. And I'll explain a little bit about that when we get into it. And then the alternate project delivery methods, most of the class I've talked about is the traditional triangle, the owner on the top and the architect and the contractor. But there may be different setups of how those people or how those entities connect. Maybe it's a design build where instead of a triangle, it's a straight line and the architect and the contractor are one entity. Or maybe the contractor has various levels called a multi-prime. And so, again, there are various reasons of why you want to do one methodology over another. Sometimes it has to do with speed, so you can get the project done more quickly. Sometimes it has to do with cost. Sometimes it has to do with whether the owner is a conservative owner or a more risk taker. So it's a balance of risks and costs and timing and everything else. All of them are used. Traditionally, probably the lump sum is still probably the most common, but they're all used out there. And so as we go through the different slides, I'll give you examples of one versus the other. Okay. So again, there are many different types of contracts out there, different form contracts. In this class, we primarily cover the AIA, American Institute of Architect contracts, largely because that's what's going to be on your AREs. It's also because it's still the most popular set of contracts out there. But as far as just so you know going forward, and my recommendation, since you guys are architects, is to stay with your home base, stay with the AIA documents. They're written favorably for you, which would make sense since they're prepared by the AIA. But the other forms that are predominant and that are commonly used out there, one are called the consensus docs. And that's a set of forms, just like the AIA has forms, that are put together by the general contractors. And as you might imagine, they are more favorable to the general contractors. And so sometimes what will happen is an owner will communicate and they'll have a favorite general contractor before they go out and get a design professional. And so when the contracts are set up, they start with the consensus doc forms. Another set of forms are called the EJCDC. E stand for engineering. And those are like the AIA, but they're more for technical facilities where architecture, the design architecture element is less important and the engineering is more important. So you may see an EJCDC on, say, a design of a roadway or a bridge or maybe a factory that has the shell of the building is just a tilt-up and it's the guts that are inside. And so that's another set of forms you may see. And a third set of probably the most common, there's four that are IAA, EJCDC, the consensus docs. And the last one is called the DBIA, Design Build Institute of America. And those are specifically tailored for when the project is going to be done on what's called a design build basis. And I'll talk about a little bit more about the design build basis second half of today's lecture so you can understand how those work. And I'll address a little bit more about the DBIA documents there. But for here, we're going to talk about the AIA documents specifically and what they do and their forms of what they use to address the different type of contracting methods and project delivery. So first here, if you recall, I've said there's a series, and there's the A series, B series, C series, and G series. I don't know what happened to D and E and F. I'm not sure whatever happened to those, but they have the G series, so they skip over. We just did the B101, and that's the B series here, and those are all the forms under the B series are between the owner and the architect. And they're all different ones. There's the B101, the 102, 103, 104. There's all different versions of what the B series does. All of them are owner-architect agreements. Okay? Right now I'm working on a B series that is for a foreign country. So for the design professional is from another country, and so it's specifically tailored to address questions about international law and how that foreign entity is going to be doing design services here in the States. The A series, which we're going to talk about after break a little bit more, the A201 specifically up there is one of the most leading documents that are used. The A series is between the owner and the contractor. And I say including bond forms, and I'll explain a little bit in a second about what a bond form is. But so there's an A101, a 102, a 103, a 104. So they have those various documents. But the 200 series, that's the A100 series. The 200 series, the A201 and related documents there, are what's called the general conditions. So if you want to think about how the AIA documents are put together, there's the 100 series, which are the business terms. 101, 102, 103, 104 is you're going to identify the parties. You're going to identify what the project is. Describing it's going to be a toy factory, how many square feet, the location where it's going to be built, various scope, the program, how many offices, what's the warehouse facility like. That will be in the 100 series. There'll be the pricing, how much they're going to pay for it. That'll be in that. And then there'll be discussions about when payment will occur, how often on a monthly basis. So it's going to be the business terms, the dollars and cents of it. That's in the 100 series. The 200 series is specifically the biggest one, the most commonly used. The A201, the 200 series, talks about the general conditions. The general conditions, for lack of better descriptions, or what I always call it, are like the rules to playing Monopoly. When you go and play a game, a board game, you read about, okay, if you're on this square, do not pass go, do not collect $200. Go directly to jail. Get a card from Community Chess. Those are instructions of how the game is played. And that's what you want to think about the general conditions. The general conditions don't talk about how much they're going to get paid. The general condition says the contractor is responsible for preparing these types of documents. The contractor is responsible for means, methods, and sequence. The contractor must not do things with hazardous materials. It's the rules of how the contractor is going to build the project. And so that's in the 200 series. And the reason why in this class we only go over the A201 is because those are where all the issues, not all, but the majority of issues that come up when there's disputes on a project, it comes up and you need to interpret what the language of the A201 says. Certainly there may be questions in a lawsuit or in a dispute about whether they were paid timely. You would look to the A100 series. I'm supposed to get paid within 30 days of sending out an invoice. But those are fairly black and white issues because it's more traditional contract law. The general conditions, the rules of monopoly, are the ones that you want to understand better. And as the architect, your job when you're out on the project site is to know the rules of monopoly as well. So when you're wandering around the project site, you know what you should or shouldn't do and what your obligations to the project are vis-a-vis the services that are being performed by the general contractor. So that's why it's really important for an architect to understand the A201. Yeah, it's good for you to know what the 100, 101, 102 is, but really your job is to make sure that the contractor is doing its work in accordance with the A201. And that's why you need to understand it. And in fact, if you remember, when you looked at the B101, occasionally it would refer to the A201. It points to that document. And in the A201, it points back to the architecture services. Okay. C-Series. C-Series are other agreements that fall into it. So C-Series may be for a construction manager. Construction manager is a little different as an animal. We'll talk a little bit about them later on in today's lecture. C-Series is used for consultants, subcontractors, So when you guys as the architect, you're going to design a building, you may not have an electrical engineer on your staff. You're going to hire an electrical engineer. That's called a consultant, sometimes a sub-consultant. Subcontractors fall on the construction side. Consultants fall on the design side. That's the difference between it. They're all subcontractors because you have a separate contract down below. But think of it on your design side, you have the design professional and its consultants and or subconsultants. On the contractor side, you have the contractor and its subcontractors that perform the work. The C-Series of the AIA have those various agreements. Contract between contractor and subcontractor. Agreement between architect and consultant. And then, like I said, construction manager, that's actually an owner agreement, and we'll cover that when we get up to what a construction manager, because the construction manager wears a couple different hats. They're not purely a general contractor. G-Series, the last series here that you guys will see, you'll see throughout all your career, you guys are going to see these documents all the time. The G-Series are standardized forms for what a payment application looks like, what a change orders are going to look like. So it's just, payment application is an invoice, but it's very detailed and it's set up with respect to how construction projects are built and designed and invoiced. So it'll say foundation, steel, carpentry, or actually rough carpentry, finished carpentry. It'll have all the different types of systems that are going in the building, and then it'll have going across this kind of matrix or this graph, this grid, will have how much the value of the contract is, how much work performed to date, how much this invoice is, how much left to be paid. And so you can chart using the pay application and the various forms under the G-Series the progress of the job. Change orders is another document in the G-Series. Change order is, as I've used an example, owner wants you to design and build and the contractor is going to build a 3-bedroom, 2-bath house. Somewhere along the process, it turns out you want to have a 3-bedroom, 3-bath house, and that is a change to the design and will ultimately be a change to the construction, and the contractor will charge more for that, so they issue a change order. And the G-Series has forms for those as well. All these are available online. They're used all the time. Fill in the blanks. Not very complicated. You can work your way through and understand those. All of these are AIA documents, yes. So you can go to AIA.org, and there's a form that says documents, and you can click on it, and you can download a PDF of them. As a lawyer and other architectural firms and any firm that you work for, most likely will have a license to actually get an editable version, so you can go in and edit it, and you can fill in all the other blanks and stuff. But if you just want a simple PDF of it and take a look and read it, you can just go to AIA.org and it's on there. Oh, on the ARE? So there are going to be questions specifically in the ARE that will address the B101 and the A201. I don't know if they have specific questions on like an A102 or A103. The concepts, to my recollection, the concepts on the ARE are you have a lump sum contract, you have a guaranteed maximum price contract, which I'm going to cover in the next slide. So the concepts of the A100 series, I don't know if they have any specific, I used to teach an ARE class, and it's been a while since I've done that. So, and they've gone, that was when it was in 3.0, then it was 4.0, they're now in ARE 5.0. I haven't gone back and looked, but before it was more focused on provisions of the A201 and the B101 and not as much on the A100 series. So, but I will go and look, and I can come back and tell you guys next class. I'll let you know what all is going to be in there. Okay. Okay, so we're going to now here, I'm just going to go only through the A100 series, just so you know the types of forms, and this is how the projects are going to be paid for. And it doesn't have to necessarily, down here, there's one more thing on design build, but this is how the projects are set up, and you want to think about when you're in the 100 series on the business terms, how are you going to get paid for. So the first one, the A101, standard form, most common, that's why it's the 101. Standard form agreement based on a stipulated sum or sometimes called lump sum agreement. Contractor gets the drawings from the architect and says, I will build this project for X. There's no questions about what it is. I'm just going to do it for $1 million. I'm going to do it for $5 million, whatever that price is. Now, the contractor will create a document called a schedule of values, which will have all those various line items for carpentry and electrical and plumbing and foundation and all those various types of different systems that are going in the building. And each one of those line items will have a dollar figure. You do that to figure out, as the project is progressing, when the contractor comes to you with their first invoice, let's say that the foundation work, the excavation work, had a line item of $100,000. I'm going to spend $100,000 to dig the hole. And the foundation work, when they pour the foundation, has another $100,000 line item on this schedule of values. Under a lump sum contract, what's going to happen when that invoice comes in is they're going to put, I'm 30% finished with excavation and foundation. So you'll see the $100,000 and you'll see $30,000 on each line item. It has nothing to do with whether the contractor has paid its excavator $30,000 or not. It has nothing to do whether it's paid its concrete guy $30,000 or not. It's a percentage basis, and in a lump sum contract, the owner does not see any of the invoices. The contractor comes in and says, I'm going to build your house for $2 million. Here are the various line items, and every month I'm going to give you a bill on an application for payment based on a percent complete. And when we get to the end, I will be 100% of $2 million. I'm going to keep all of my invoices to myself. And so if the contractor that says they're 30% finished has only paid the excavator $15,000, you still owe $30,000 because that's how it's set up. So the difference between what happens in a lump sum contract is you never see the profit that the contractor can make. Now, sometimes that's okay, because sometimes the reason why you want to do that in a lump sum is you don't have time, nor do you have the staff or the resources to go through every single pay application. If you're on a complex project, and I do a lot of complex projects, a pay application may be 3 or 4 inches thick with all the invoices and backup from every single one of the subcontractors doing work. The amount of time to take to go through and make sure all those things were properly invoiced and paid and everything else, and then brought up into the front page pay application line item is tremendous. And you have to hire someone. You have to have your in-house accounting team, or you have to hire an owner's rep or something. And so often, you're going to want to do a lump sum project. My home renovation, my kitchen, my 100 square foot kitchen addition was a lump sum contract. Now, I had him give me all the invoices anyway because I wanted to see them, but it didn't matter. It was just a lump sum contract. It's a lot less brain damage. You don't have to worry about it. Now, there has to be a certain value of trust that goes between the owner and the contractor, but that's the reason why. It's a simpler, more straight-up process. I've seen your drawings. I'm going to do the project for $2 million. Do you agree with that? And you can still have other contractors bid on it. So the same set of drawings goes to 3 contractors, and one comes in at $2 million, one comes in at 1.9, the other one comes in at $2 million. You can figure out who you want to select. So it's not like you're getting taken for a ride. It's up to the owner to make sure there's competition, but that's what a lump sum is. Okay. Yeah.
Is the contractor locked into their initial bid? Like, if you agree on $2 million
yes.
before they start?
That's a great question. So yes, they are. So if they say they're going to do the project for $2 million and there are no changes, you don't add that additional bathroom. There's not contaminated soils where they have to do. There's not an extended winter conditions where the project extended longer and it was as cold as it was this winter, and outside factors that could cause more cost. If the project goes as planned and they said they would do it for $2 million and the contractor actually spends $2.2 million, you only pay $2 million. You've both agreed to this lump sum project. And that's the beauty of the lump sum, is you know what it is going in, you don't have to question it, and you put all of the math and all the other problems with management of cost and invoicing and everything on the contractor. The other side is you never know how much profit they're making off of you, so you have to balance that. Okay, second one, the A102. That's a standard form of agreement based on the cost of work plus a fee with a guaranteed maximum price. So this is the situation where I said you get that pay-up and it's 2 or 3 inches thick. What this is when you say cost of the work, and you can see it's capitalized here. Again, it's a defined term, and we had that in the B101 what the cost of the work was. It's every dollar that the contractor spends on building this, materials and labor, permitting, other elements that are brought into it. And so for each pay application that comes in, the contractor says, here you owe me $125,000, and here is all the backup that I have paid all of these bills. Now what it is, though, is cost of work plus a fee. That's the contractor's profit and overhead. It's their fee. And to do that, because the contractor is on the project site, the contractor may or may not do any of the work. Contractors may just be kind of managing it. Sometimes you find a contractor that we have an arm that does concrete, or we have an arm that does steel. But a lot of these general contractors don't do any of the work. All of the work is actually performed by the subcontractors and trades. But the contractor has to make money for managing all this, and they have to have a trailer on the site, and they have to have the project superintendent, and they have to carry the insurance, and all the things, because you don't want a contract with 50 different entities, you just want the one-stop shopping. So that's where the contractor's fee comes in. And a fee is negotiated. So what ends up happening is for every invoice that comes in from a subcontractor, the contractor gives that to you, passes it along as backup, and taps a fee on top of it. Most of the time it's based on a percentage. So, say you're doing, in the city of Chicago, you're doing interior offices. A traditional contractor fee ranges between 1.5% and 3%. So every $100 they pay a subcontractor, they get another $1.50 to $3. That is their fee on top of it. So you just add it on top. So it's a cost of the work plus a fee. Now, that's the same thing as the 103. A102, 103, both of them are cost of work plus a fee. The difference is the 102 is called with a guaranteed maximum price, and 103 is without a guaranteed maximum price. What's the guaranteed maximum price? Well, if you take the 103, if I come to you and you send me, you're the homeowner, and you say, Mr. Hanahan, I know you're a construction firm. Here are the drawings for my house. Can you build this house for me? And I look at it and I'm like, yeah, I can build this for you. I'll do it as a cost of the work plus a fee, no guaranteed maximum price. That means for every dollar I spend, and going to your question, am I locked into the $2 million? No. If I spend $2.2 million, I get $2 million plus my fee. If I spend $3 million, you keep paying me. There is no end in sight. So the contractor has less motivation, in my opinion, under the 103 to tighten the belt, to make sure they're doing things economically and for the benefit of the owner. Now, there are some projects under the 103 that actually make more sense, higher risk and everything else, but there's no cap. There's no ceiling. The lump sum, you know the ceiling, $2 million. 103 without a guaranteed maximum price, no ceiling whatsoever. So it's a risk. The risk is shifted from the contractor to the owner. And you have to make sure the contractor properly manages his time. So the middle ground is this 102, which is very common. This is the same concept, but it has a guaranteed maximum price. So the contractor comes to me and he says, I will build your house for cost of the work plus a fee of $2.1 million. I think I can get it done for less. And that's why you should go with me. But I promise I will never go over $2.1 million. And so you have that benefit of knowing it might come in at $1.8 million. Because the contractors tighten their belt and they've done what they were supposed to do and use value engineering or whatever it is. And so you're only going to pay $1.8 million, but you know it'll never go over 2.1. And so what happens often between this lump sum and the GMP, they call this the GMP, guaranteed maximum price, between the lump sum and the GMP is often, if you set it out to bid and you say, I want you three to bid me this is a lump sum, and you three to bid me this is a GMP, often the GMP is going to come in slightly higher than the lump sum. But you have the chance of the final project price coming in lower. With a lump sum, you have no idea what profit and what extra cost the contractor is making off of you because you don't see any of that. With the GMP, you see every invoice. You know its exact profit because that's what the fee is. They have to tell you what that profit is. And so it's kind of the best of both worlds. So I would tell my clients as kind of a general rule of thumb, if you're going to be doing a project that's a couple $100,000 or maybe under $1 million, you don't want to do cost of the work with no GMP. Because you never know. That $200,000 project, if the contractor is sloppy and not really minding its P's and Q's, may go to $300,000 really quick. So my recommendation is, for the smaller projects, use a lump sum. You as a homeowner don't have time to process all the paperwork and look through everything. Contractor doesn't want to do that. They're going to charge you a little bit extra for that management and all that other stuff. Just do a lump sum for the smaller projects, and that's a pretty standard recommendation. When you get to something over $1 million, and even going into the much higher, do the GMP. That way you get to see every invoice. Now, sometimes actually the economy sometimes dictates what happens. When construction as a whole is very busy, the best contractors, because they can make the most money on a lump sum because they're bearing their fee, will say, I will only do this for you for a lump sum. Sometimes you're stuck with it. So if everybody's really busy and you don't have, you really want a good contractor, you may be stuck with that. But you try to do the GMP. Sometimes, though, an owner will say, it's not about me not having the time and the resources to go through all of the paperwork. What I want to do is I want to put all the risks, because with a lump sum, I know I can go back to my shareholders and I know that this plant is going to be $125 million and it's not going to go over. And I don't have to worry. Whereas here, they may have bid it at $130 million and they may go up to $130 million. I don't have to worry about all this. So I'm going to shift all the risk onto the lump sum side. So there's different business reasons of why you want to do it. And you guys don't, when you get more seasoned in your practice, you'll understand why you want to recommend to one client or the other. Lump sum here, GMP here, straight cost of plus work there. So there's various reasons why you want to do those three. These three are the most common. The A104, the next one down here, this is if you have a more unique type of project that you don't need as many pages. So if you think about these contracts here, the 101, 102, 103, those contracts are only be between 25 and 40 pages long, plus the general conditions, which is another 50 pages long. So it's a pretty lengthy, detailed contract. What the A104 does is it takes elements of the 101 and 102 you can actually select. I'm going to do, under the A104, you could say, this contract's going to be lump sum, or there's a whole other section that says, no, this contract's going to be cost of the work, and there's a third part that says it's going to be cost of the work with the GMP. So you can pick which of these formats in the A104, and then it takes a lot of the really detailed guts of the A201, cuts them out, and kind of lumps it all together. So it's a shorter, abbreviated form. I will use this with a single scope type project. Like if I do, a lot of buildings do tuck pointing and exterior sealant and weatherproofing. So they're not dealing with electrical and plumbing and carpentry and everything else. It's one contractor, one trade, a very specialized type of format of work that they're going to do. So I'll just use the A104, coordination issues, lots of things that aren't relevant. If I'm going to do, like I didn't even do this for my house, but if you're going to do a house, a small addition, you don't need the big complicated 101, 102, 103. You can use the 104. It's a little simpler. It's smaller. It's just kind of a lighter contract. So that's why they call it the abbreviated form. And like I said, it takes into consideration the delivery models of the 101, 102, and 103. You just check which one you want and you cross the other ones out. So it has everything for you all in one. Last form out here that I have, and by the way, there's about 30 A-series, A100 series forms, but these are the top ones. The last one down here is the A141, and it's the first four here are the 2017 versions. The 141, the design build, is from 2014, so that'll be updated in 2024. Most of the main AIA documents are rotated on the 7s, 97, 2007, 2017. The next one will be 2027. For whatever reason, the design build documents are on the 4s. So this is an agreement between an owner and a design builder. And as I said, a design builder, instead of having your triangle, owner, architect, contractor, a design builder is just going to be a straight line. Owner, one entity, a design build entity that will deliver both. You enter into a contract with one company, and that company will both design and construct the building. And so as a result, there are some different elements that have to be in the agreement. If you think about it, we're going to take the B101, the owner-architect agreement, and the A201, and we're going to mush them together. And you're going to talk about it because the different scopes in those two documents now need to be in one. So this is a specialized agreement between the owner and the design builder. The reason why I have 141/2 is there are two standard exhibits that are used for that document. I'm not going to go into the detail of them, but just know that when you enter into a 141, there's going to be you're going to need an Exhibit B and an Exhibit A and an Exhibit B that are AIA form documents that are used as a part of it. So I would say that while design build is a very popular method, there are better design build agreements than the AIA A141. The DBIA has a really nice set. Let me back that up. It depends on who you're representing. If you are an architect and you are in a design build entity where the architect is the leading entity, meaning probably the more majority shareholder, I would use the DBIA. If you are an architect where it's the contractor side of it, because the design build is architect and contractor, where the contractor is the leading entity in that design build firm, then you would probably use the AIA A141. So I just executed a 141 for a company where it was design build, the principal was a contractor, and for this project alone, they brought in an architect to assist. So that's why we use the AIA 141. Okay. So we just had, these were all the A series. Now I'm going to talk about the B series. I did the B series a little bit different. I did graphically so you can understand how the percentage of use that they are. So we just did, if you remember, we did the B101. And so if you take a look at this chart here, on the bottom are, if you have small projects, anywhere between $1,000 and $5,000, $20,000, $100,000, somewhere in this range. Large projects, the ones that are, in the millions, tens and hundreds of millions on top. And what you're going to look at here is, if you can see this big square kind of going around here, the B101 goes all the way down into small projects and goes all the way up into the large projects. The B101 is the most widely used and most flexible of all of the documents. That's why it's used the most. It has by far the largest square. Okay? Now, the B105, that's the one you use for your kitchen renovation. Simple. Architect's going to do these designs, very simple, not very complex. It just has some conditions. It doesn't have a lot of walking on the project site. It doesn't have a lot of coordination. Payment issues are pretty straightforward. So the B105, very straightforward and simple. I will tell you this. I have never, in my legal career, ever drafted a B105. And the reason why is, it's so simple, the architect doesn't need to hire a lawyer to do it. They just use it. So they don't need, I think you always should hire a lawyer in case you get in trouble, but at the same time, it's a very basic agreement. So if you guys are going to go out there and you're working, you're hang your shingle, and you're just doing small projects, the B105 may be just good enough for you. Or you can take a B101, kind of get it standardized for you, and use it over and over and over and over. The B104, these are for medium-sized projects. Now the B104, not surprisingly, is mostly used with the A104. So when you have one of these specialized projects, like when you do a tuck pointing and window sealant and those types of projects, there's going to be an engineer that's going to be performing services to make sure that they're using the right type of sealant and the right type of concrete and the right type of stone and how the tuck pointing is going to go. So the engineer designs it, the contractor builds it, and these two documents are B104 and A104 are used to kind of be married together. Smaller, more narrowly focused projects is the B104. Not a lot of complex, different systems that are involved. So that's what you use that for. But because these projects can cost a lot of money too, I mean, sometimes a tuck pointing project for a building may be tens of millions of dollars, so depending on the size of the space, it can expand all the way up into the larger projects. And then finally on top, the B103 is for extra large complex projects. And there are very few differences between the 103 and the 104. It has to do with various coordination aspects. There's not a lot. I have used the B103 a few times, probably, maybe a dozen in my career over 20-some years, because by and large the B101 can handle it. But every once in a while there's just some unique aspects of what that project is that calls for the B103. You guys may never see it in the entire career, but that's how it's kind of the breakdown as far as the usage of the three different types of AI owner-architect agreements. Okay. So let's talk about the various pricing variations, and I've talked a little about the setup of them, but we'll walk through them in more detail here as far as now that we know where the A series and the B series sits in the AIA world. Okay. First of all, fixed price or lump sum contract. What we have here is it says, contractor bears all the risks of overruns, of cost overrun. That $2 million that the contractor said they do it for, if it costs them more, their problem, not yours. So the risk is shifted to the contractor. Second, contractor has the possibility, though, of windfall profits. If that contractor says, I'll do it for you for $2 million, and knows that they can get it done for 1.6, they make $400,000, and you aren't the wiser. And so the risk then comes into it, and this is where the trust that has to be in existence between the owner and the contractor, and where the owner has to do their homework. Because the contractor is going to say, I can do this for $2 million, and then they figure out where to cut costs. I remember going back, this is I don't remember the movie that it was in, but I remember seeing this when I was in high school. I was watching this movie one night, and it always comes into my mind when I give this lecture about the risks and where the contractor can make profit. The scene is there's a guy that he has a series of chairs. There's 50 chairs that he wants repainted, and they're all white, and he wants them painted red. And so he brings in their painter, the contractor, the painter, and he says, I'm doing it on an hourly basis. And he says, okay, well, how much does that cost? He's like, I don't know, let me paint one of your chairs. And so they show in this picture the guy's painting the chairs, and he says, it took me 30 minutes to paint a chair, so it'll be 2 chairs an hour, and here's my hourly rate. And so the contractor, the painting contractor, and it's beautifully done, and he thinks it's really nice, it's the best one that he's talked to, so he has a very high-quality painter, and they come to a price, and they agree to the contract, and the lump sum will be X. And so the painter's sitting there with his apprentice, they sign the contract, in this video, and I don't remember, they don't sign a contract, but they shake hands and they agree, I'll pay you X. And the gentleman walks out of the building, and the painter turns to his apprentice and says, spray it. And they spray paint them all, and they get them all done in 2 hours instead of 14 hours, and he makes money off of it. Because he had a faster, cheaper way of doing it. Now that's okay if the quality is fine. So in that instance, the contractor bid a price, the owner accepted it, he should be paid what the owner agreed. The contractor had a different methodology to make money, that's okay, if the quality is what you want. But that's where the risk comes in, with this windfall profits and potentially an adverse relationship, because if the quality isn't there, if they're cutting corners so the contractor makes profit, how do you balance that? Well, you agree that I do it. If it's done, it's done. And that's where you as the architect come into play. When you're walking around the project site, you guys are looking at quality control to make sure that what the contractor is delivering is what you envisioned and what is on the drawings. And so the risk or the adversarial relationship that comes in between in a lump sum contract is it pits the contractor against the architect, because the contractor is always trying to figure out how to make profits and come in under that lump sum bid, and the architect is always trying to make sure that it's the best possible delivery, because he or she is helping to represent the owner. And so there's this fight, this adversary that comes between the contractor and the architect, and it bubbles up between the owner and the architect and the owner and the contractor. So lump sum shifts the risk to the contractor, Carrying that risk, I can make more profit and inherently have more potential fights. You will find more disputes in litigation and construction industry under lump sum contracts than you will have in any other one. Because of that, I can't see behind the curtain. Are you cutting costs? Is the architect telling me to do something that I shouldn't have to? Those are the types of things. Next, cost plus. Time and materials are the cost of the work, so you have cost plus contracts. And as I said, there's the regular cost plus, and then there's one with have the guaranteed maximum price. So, with a cost plus, the fee, that's their overhead and profit. It can be based on a percentage. For every $100, I get 6%. Oh, I gave you only one example. So back to Chicago. So Chicago, your interior office space will be between 1.5 and 3. For the building of a commercial building, whether it's a high-rise or a strip mall, the percentage, like a contractor, the fee that they're going to charge is anywhere between 4.5 and 7%, that bandwidth. And then if you're in the residential market, depending on the size and scale of the residential market, the fee will be anywhere between 6% and 12%. And so sometimes if you have like a big project, let's say you're working on a high-end, high dollar value project that's maybe, say, $10 million house, well, the fee is going to be closer to that 6, 7, 8% because that's such a volume. But at the flip side, if it's high detail, they may get to closer to 8 or 10. So the residential, you want to have more attention by the contractor. So interior, commercial, 1.5 to 3. Commercial in general, the fee for contractor is 4.5 to 7, and then residential 6 to 12. Okay. So it can be a percentage. It could be a fixed sum. I'm going to build this $2 million house for you, and my general conditions and my fee for this project is going to be a set fee. It's not based on a percentage. So if the project comes in at $1.8 million, I still make the set fee. If the project comes in at $2.2 million, I still make the same fee. So sometimes you can have a fixed sum for the fee, or you can have a combination of a formula. I'll have a fixed sum till this point, and then after that I get more on top of it. All different models of how they can do a fee. So it's cost of the work plus a fee. The problem with the cost plus, straight out, it's difficult for the owner to control costs. You never know if they're going to hit that $2 million cap unless you have this guaranteed maximum price. So you solve your cost control problems with saying I want a GMP. And that's the methodology between the 101 and the 102. Shared savings. So here's another thing. This is an incentivizer for the contractor. So owner comes to contractor and says, can you do this as a cost plus for a GMP? And the contractor says, you know, I don't like, there's some risks in this project. There's some interesting things. I don't know about the soils. There's some problems here. I feel I'm hesitant to give you a guaranteed maximum price. I just think it needs to be open-ended lump sum, or open-ended cost plus. And the owner says, okay, look, but I need to control my costs. So I want to do a GMP. How do we come to a solution to that? What's the incentive? Because the contractor's like, well, what's the incentive of me taking the risk? Because I have a cap. Like, I can't go over the cap. I'm not allowed. Once I get to the cap, then it's just like a lump sum of contract. And the owner says, well, how about this? For every dollar you come in under your bid, we'll split that dollar. It'll be free money for you. We'll share your savings. So, contractor's like, okay, I'm going to bid this project and it'll be $10 million. I can build this project for you for $10 million. If it costs the contractor 10.1, you still only pay him $10 million because that's the guaranteed cap. But if the project comes in at $9 million and there's $1 million savings, a very common shared savings percentage is 25%, 75%. So if the project comes in at $9 million, you pay the contractor the $9 million, and then you give them a check for $250,000, 25% of that savings for free. You did such a good job in managing costs and keeping under and saving me money, and you never got to your cap of $10 million, I'm going to give you a bonus. We are going to share in the savings. This creates teamwork between the owner and the contractor. The owner is incentivized to save money for the owner because it makes free money. The parties work together in conjunction when you have a shared savings clause. So you say to them, yes, I'm putting some risk on you because you got a cap, but I'm going to give you a carrot as well. And the carrot is a shared savings. It's a pretty nice deal. Very, very common to see in a GMP contract a shared savings provision. You don't see shared savings in lump sum because they get all their share. With a lump sum, they get 100% of their savings. It's all profit for them. And with a cost plus, since it's open-ended, there's no savings because you're picking it up as the owner. Change orders. So I talked about a change order is physically, we've gone from a 3-bedroom, 2-bath house to a 3-bedroom, 3-bath house. So you have to change the design and you have to change the construction. Those change orders will have a cost associated with them. And there's a value to that cost as it affects the contract. So let's take the $2 million house situation. So it was for $2 million, it better be more than a 3-bedroom, 2-bath house. So let's say in a $2 million house, it was a 5-bedroom, 4-bath house, okay? Contractor says, I'm going to do it at a GMP for $2 million. It's a 5-bedroom, 4-bathroom house. And somewhere along the way, the owner requests to make it a 5-bedroom, 5-bath house. Contractor looks at the new drawings from the architect and says, to add that 5th bathroom, it's going to be another $100,000. So the GMP goes from $2 million to $2.1 million. But if the contractor still brings it in at $1.9 million, now we have a shared savings of $1.1 million. So even though there's truly a $100,000 add for this bathroom of actual cost, they still could bring it in under the GMP. So all it does is it changes the cap. A change order on a lump sum contract only affects the cap because you're really just, whatever it costs to build is what it costs to build. A lot of people get really confused when you talk to them about this concept. You're like, well, is this going to cost me more than $100,000 more? And I'm like, well, yes, it will because it's just the cost. But that doesn't mean they're going to go over the cap because the cap already goes up. If you add anything, the cap goes up, but they still could come in under the cap. Does that make sense? Because the cap is, I'm never going to spend more than this. You can always spend less. The cap will be adjusted, yes, because it's a change. Because when they bid the project, it was 5-bedroom, 4-bath. And I said I could do it for $2 million. Now you're telling me to build a 5-bedroom, 5-bath. Well, that's $2.1 million, so you adjust the cap. But I, as the contractor, is still going to work my tail off to come in under that so I can make my extra 25% free bonus money. So it's nice. It keeps the parties on a fair and equal basis. The contractor doesn't feel like, oh, well, you added a bathroom, but my $2 million stays $2 million. That's not fair. The owner says, okay, you added $100,000, but if you can build that bathroom for only $60,000, you get 25% of that $40,000 savings. So even in a change order where it increases the cap, there still creates that incentive as a partnership to build the project as cheaply, not cheaply, to save money on the project. You never want a cheap project. No owner wants a cheap project. They just want it to be cost savings. One other type of project or construction pricing model is what's called unit price. Unit price you're going to see in concrete work, you're going to see in roadway work, you're going to see in excavation work. For every cubic yard of concrete that I pour, you pay me X dollars per cubic yard. It's a very basic formula. For plumbing, for every linear foot of copper piping that I put in, you pay me this price. And built into that unit price is the value of the materials plus the labor to install it. So I do work every once in a while. I've done some contracts with IDOT, roadway contracts. All roadway, not all, but majority of roadway contracts are done by a unit price. They come in, they're going to do X miles of roadway, and they say, we're going to do these miles of roadway, we're going to have rebar, we're going to have concrete, we're going to have excavation, we're going to have earthwork, whatever we're going to do as part of the excavation. Each one of those is a unit price per cubic foot, per linear foot, per how much rebar, sometimes it's by weight. So it's a specific measurable unit, and that's what the cost is. You don't have to get into saying, well, percentage complete or how much I actually pay for it. It's the unit per various specified type of work. Those are your three. Lump sum, cost plus, which will be open-ended or guaranteed maximum price, and unit price. Those are the most common you're going to see out there. There's some other random things, one called the target price, some other stuff, but I won't get into that because you rarely see that. These are the three you will be dealing with most in your career. Any questions on pricing models? Okay. Competitive bidding. So that's another thing that comes into when you're doing contracting methods. So you're a homeowner. You want a 100 square foot kitchen addition. You have your drawings from your architect. You wanted to find out which contractor is going to do it for me for the best price. I want to go out and competitively bid it. You're a governmental entity. You're going to build a new sports complex or a new arena. You're going to need to go out and competitively bid it. You're doing roadway work. You need to competitively bid it. So in your AIA contract is a process to competitively bid the projects. Do all projects get competitively bid? No. Do the majority of them? Yes. Give an example. Haribo, my gummy bear client. We just went out back last month on an RFQ. RFQ is request for qualifications. There were about 18 to 20 construction firms, since we've already had the designers on board. There are about 18 to 20 construction firms that are interested in building this facility. So we wanted to find out what their qualifications are. Have you ever done a food processing facility? Have you done a project in the X hundreds of millions? What does your team look like? What is your financial worth? Are you financially stable? Are we a situation where we're going to hire you and you're not going to be able to have the team, the horses? So you send out what's called an RFQ, request for qualifications. From that, they got, I think, 15 companies that actually filled it out. And then they went and had very short interviews. And then we're at the process now, we're going to winnow that down to maybe 6 to 8 or 9. I'm not sure what the number's going to be because they're working right now through that process. And then there will be an RFP, request for proposal. And that proposal then will come back. The contractors will look at the drawings. They're going to say, here's some more detail about us. Here's our teams in more depth. Here's our history. Here's our litigation history. Lots and lots of stuff. And here's how we're going to build it. And here's our price. Those 6 to 8 firms will be competing against each other in a competitive bidding process. So I do all the RFPs for them, and then we have a very detailed evaluation system to walk through. So the AAA contracts will talk about that. First of all, what you need to know is there is a requirement, a mandate for any public project, any government project must be competitively bid. The reason is simple. If they weren't competitively bid and a congressman or a senator or an alderman or your local mayor or whoever it is, from the smallest community all the way to the federal government, if they didn't have competitive bid, they could just hand it to their buddies. And the projects we build and everybody makes money. And the people that are supposed to be serving the public, as much as this still happens anyways with lobbyists and everything else, but the people that serve the public could be get glad-handed because they could be helping their friends out to make construction or whatever it is. And construction is by far one of the largest budget items in any governmental budget. I mean, obviously in the federal government, the military is large, but in your local government, construction's pretty big. Roadways, keeping things running, the sewer systems, all that's construction. So you have to have it to protect the public interest as competitive. It's all by statute, all mandated. There are two different types of biddings, competitive biddings, that you can do in public jobs. These two types also apply to private. The first is called lowest responsible bidder, and the second is best value. Lowest responsible bidder is by far the most used. If it's a contract for the providing of goods or the providing of construction services, by and large, it must be the lowest responsible bidder. And what does that mean? That means when you open up the 10 bids and you open the envelopes, the lowest price wins so long as that entity is responsible, meaning they filled out the forms correctly and they are the type of firm that does this work. So if you're doing a road and the IDOT goes out and says we're doing this stretch of the highway from mile marker 15 to mile marker 32, And they get in 5 bids from roadway contractors, and each of those 5 entities have filled the forms out properly, and they've all built roads before, and so they're responsible and responsive. When they open the bids, the lowest bid wins. There's no question. There's no evaluation. There's no machination. Low bid wins. That's traditional common. Best value is when you bring in often a service, a professional service. So for design build. So like the project I'm working on a project out in New York State. It's a $700 million medical facility, like a research lab, series of labs. That project is going to be design build. And because the design entity, the professional, comes into aesthetics and creativity and elements like that, the owner is not mandated, the owner being the New York State government, is not mandated to take the lowest bid. They take the bid that delivers the best value because design and creativity are relevant in how the facility will work. So when you do design build, let's say you get 5 bids, you don't have to take the lowest. You can take the second or the third. You can take whichever bid you want, but you have to have a very robust process of how you evaluate that. And it's by percentages and there's a whole bunch of stuff that goes into how you actually score to get the best value. Best value bidding in the government has not been around for a long time, maybe 20, 30 years. With the advent of design build, it's becoming more common, obviously, because what you don't want is to bring in the lowest bid and it's a crappy contractor and you have a crappy road, or not a road but a crappy facility. You know, the governmental office building that doesn't work, or what have you. So the design build methodology is something that the governments have recognized are good. But as I said, both lowest responsible and best value are also used often in the private market too. That's exactly what we're going to be doing. The best value method we're going to be using for Haribo. We're going to say, it doesn't mean that we have to pick the lowest bid. We're going to take the best bid. What's the best value for our money?
So do they have any sort of design in place before bidding out to design build?
That's a great question. So the question is, will there be any designs in place before? So the answer is not always, but frequently. The concept is called, what they'll call bridging documents or a basis of design. So sometimes what's going to happen, so I worked with McCormick Place on the new hotel. They have a 1,200 some odd room hotel, and then they have the arena that they share with the DePaul. I don't know if anybody has seen that or familiar with it. I think it was Caesar Pelli did the DePaul arena. It's DePaul and McCormick Place. It's a 10,000-seat arena and everything else. So for both of those, they were the McCormick Place, the MPEA, actually it's Metropolitan Pier and Exposition Authority is the true entity. They retained design consultants to put together what they wanted and had layouts of what the hotel would look like. It wasn't all the architecture, but they said we need, and it wasn't simply a program. There were some graphic designs and everything else. And so that was presented to the design build entities so they could actually bid the price and figure out, well, then from there we're going to make the design and the architecture ours. It'll be more creative. But they were given a roadmap, like I said, bridging documents. I would put them at almost pre-schematic. If you think about schematic, design, development, everything, it's an idea. We did the same thing for Navy Pier. I've done that thing. What did I do? I'm trying to remember another project we did. Oh, well, actually for this New York medical facility, the research facility. And that's, by the way, that's the one I keep telling you I can't tell you. The government just announced. So it's now in public. It's the Dormitory Authority of the State of New York, which actually mostly builds college campuses. They're taking 5 major medical research facilities across the state, combining it into one. It's going to be in the Albany, where the government is located. It's going to be a multi-complex, $700 million facility. And so for that, they hired a company to prepare what they're calling, instead of bridging documents, they call it a basis of design. It's a 600-page document. and it says, okay, you're going to have this many labs, you're going to have this many clean rooms, you're going to have this many research facility rooms, this many offices, and then if it's a lab, like they have a nuclear lab, it'll have pages and pages of specifications of the nuclear lab must conform to these specs. The clean rooms must have this much of the air quality in that. The various elements that are what they call in the basis of design, but there's no graphics. It's just all a codes book. They hand that to the design builder. The design builder is going to create something. So often they will use this bridging documents or basis of design as an initial roadmap for that. Architecture or engineering. So for the medical facility, the lab up in New York Upstate, it's a company called Jacobs Engineering, one of the largest engineering companies in the world. Often they'll use architecture firms to do that. McCormick Place uses a company called TDS for some of their stuff, so they have various people that know the culture and the feel of what that company will use. So for Haribo, we're actually using a German contractor that has a German designer that has designed other Haribo facilities, and they're working as somewhat of a consultant for this as well. So it's very common to keep kind of a theme and a feel for the owner. So. Okay, purposes, lowest cost. It's an impartial forum for contractor selection. If you have this lowest responsible bidder, everybody submits their envelopes, and on a very certain day, you open them up and the lowest wins. And it's impartial because as long as they filled out the forms right and they're responsible, they can do the work, lowest wins. That's an impartial forum. The best value, it's true, is supposed to be impartial because you have, before the proposals come in, you set up your evaluation criteria. So that's one of the things that I specialize in, is writing RFPs and then preparing how the evaluation process works. And then the evaluators are set in place. And so once the bids come in, the team then evaluates according to a set of rules, and those are very transparent. The whole part of it is transparency. So that's that process here. After you get the bidders in, so what we're probably going to do, not for sure, but probably what we'll do with Haribo is let's say we get 6 bids come in. We'll take those 6 bids, we'll go through the first wave, and we'll cut it down to 2 or 3. We will shortlist. Certainly, we've already going to shortlist from the RFQ phase to the RFP phase. We're going to go from the 15 or so down to 6 or 8. That's not uncommon. That's why you have the request for qualification. This contractor, they've never done a food facility, so I don't want them to be building this one. It's important to us that we're not the guinea pig the first time coming out of the box. So that's what you have. So you can shortlist at 2 different times. You can shortlist as a pre-qualification process, or you can shortlist or you can shortlist after proposals are received. We frequently do this, right? A couple of the projects, actually almost all the projects we did on the power plants that I've worked in and for a client up in Iowa and Wisconsin, every single one of them we would start out with anywhere between 6 to 10 bidders. We would winnow it down to 2, and then we would go through a process. That's after the proposals came in. And then we would go through a negotiation process with the 2 final shortlists to see who ends up winning best and final offers, how do they, sharpening their pencils to get the best price, lots of different stuff. So that's the process. The reason why this is relevant for you is in the B101, you may remember, there's a section, I believe it's Section 3.5, that was competitive bidding, and you actually will assist the owner with this process. You'll help them prepare an RFQ. You'll help them prepare an RFP. We actually had the architect for the Haribo facility prepared the first draft of the RFQ, and then I rewrote it, and then we fixed it, and then we sent it out. But you guys will be a part of that process. Okay? Any questions on competitive bidding? All right? The process here, you send out an invitation for bidders, you get the submittal of the bids, then there's the opening, the big grand opening of proposals. There's an evaluation. The evaluation will be more in the best value as opposed to the lowest responsible. Hopefully all the bidders in the lowest responsible have already been deemed as responsible. Notification of award you send out, you say, Jane Contractor, you have won the award to be the contractor to build my toy factory, and then from there you then sign a contract. Between notification and award, there's going to be probably more in-depth contract negotiations. But that's your general process of what happens. And you, as the architect, will be involved, or often, not always, but often involved throughout the entire time. Any questions? Okay. What happens if there are problems with the bid? Are there rules to if something goes wrong? And the answer is yes. First, what if there are bidding errors? Bids with clerical arithmetic errors may be withdrawn, but they cannot be modified. So, what does that mean and how does that work? Every RFP, every request for proposal will say, all bids are due by 5 p.m. on Friday, January 15th, or whatever the date is. We could say today, Friday, March 15th, 5 p.m. All bids are due by that time. In virtually every instance, the bids all roll in about 11:55, or maybe 4:55, right before. But occasionally you may have a contractor that wants to be ahead of the game, and they submit their bid a day or two earlier. They're under the wire. And then they may go back and say, oh my gosh, I have an arithmetic error. If it's in, they can withdraw it. And they can ask permission if it's before the deadline to resubmit, because they haven't been officially opened before the deadline. However, if the bid comes in and there's an arithmetic error and the contractor discovers it not before that Friday deadline, but the next Tuesday, they cannot call up the government or the entity that's receiving the bids and say, I saw arithmetic error, I want to fix it. They can only withdraw and remove themselves from the chance of winning. It's kind of harsh, but it's important. So that's why the contractors go all the way to the end, because they're double checking all their math and making everything else. So an arithmetic error you can withdraw, but you cannot change. In fact, I had a project where we were working with a contractor or with an owner entity. It was a very high-profile project. We saw that there was a clear arithmetic error in their bid. It was just glaring. And we had to notify them, and they wanted to change it. And my client wanted to let them change it. And I told them they can't. They said, why not? And I said, because the entity that is going to get second, because they wanted to award it to this contractor. I said, the entity that's going to get second is going to find out, and they're going to challenge you in a bid protest, and the law says you're not allowed to modify. Because if they're allowed to modify because they made an arithmetic error, why wouldn't somebody else call up and say, oh, I did a math error. Mine's a little bit cheaper. So you have to draw a line. And I said, you can give them one or two choices. Or you have one or two choices. Choice A is you call them up and tell them they're stuck with it or they withdraw. That's choice A. Give them the choice. But they cannot change it. Or choice B is you guys can withdraw the entire RFP and cancel it entirely and reissue it and get all new bids. If you really want to give them a chance to really win it on the merits, then you got to kick everybody out and start all over. And they opted for the latter. They restarted it. It was a cost and took time and everything else, but they wanted everybody to have a fair shot. So, math errors, withdraw, but can't modify. Bids with judgment errors. Oh, I wasn't sure. I didn't understand. I wasn't sure what this meant. You cannot withdraw that. They're stuck with it. So how does a contractor, whether it's an architect trying to get an award or a contractor trying to get an award, or design building, how do they help themselves out so there's not these judgment errors? Well, in every RFP process, there's a question and answer period on the calendar. It's like, okay, I got your RFP, request for proposal, on January 1st. My proposals are due March 1st, so I get 3 months to do that. 2 months to do that, to figure out what my proposal is. During that 2-month window, there's going to be a set thing on the calendar that says that the bidders can ask questions, almost always in writing, of the owner to get clarification. I don't understand this. What do you mean by that? Are the drawings going to be changed for this? To avoid judgment or other interpretation errors. And the owner is required to respond in writing, and so everybody has a fair shot at the answers. So if you are on a team ever that's submitting in response to an RFP, and you probably will in your careers, it's always fast and furious. It's crazy. You got to get these drawings in here, get this example. What's our team together? Give me your bio, and you're pulling papers together last minute. See if you can get ahead of that curve and look at the RFP and say, if you have questions, submit it back to the owner in writing. You'll be able to avoid this. Because if there's an error in judgment or interpretation, you're stuck with your bid. And that's sometimes what the result is your bid comes out the cheapest, the lowest. And so the owner grabs it because it's the lowest bid, and you're now stuck saying, well, I didn't think that's what that meant. Well, if it really means that, I got to bid higher. I have that right now, a situation right now, where it's one of these tuck pointing, weatherproofing bids. The drawings that were submitted by the architect engineer had the east facade and the south facade in the drawings. The west and the north are mirrors of the east and the south. So they only put in the two facades of the building. The RFP itself says you need to bid for the entire building. But when the entity from the tuck pointing company was putting their bid together, they only saw the two facades. So they only bid for certain elements of it for half the building. So there was an error in judgment of what they were supposed to bid. They, of course, won the bid. And we got to contract signing. We went to the contract was finished, and we went to the pre-construction meeting, and we showed up, and they're like, oh, we have to do all four sides? And we're like, yeah, it says it right here, all four sides. It says all. See the word all? Like, well, we only saw the two drawings. So we only saw the two facades, so our bid's for the two facades. We're like, well, you're stuck with the price, because that's what you bid. So they are potentially withdrawing from working on it, and so we have to go back, and the question is now it's private, so we're not bound by governmental laws that we have to rebid it. So we're hoping actually when they reprice it, they're still going to come in cheaper, because there was a big gulf between what they had and what the other ones did, because the other ones bid on four sides of the building. So it happens for real. So I have that going on right now. We haven't come to the final conclusion yet, but it'll be soon because they need to start work. Okay. Last. Now, the flip side of this is what's called the snap-up rule. You can't do that. So if the owner sees, now in this case, there was a big gulf in the building that I was just telling you about. There was a big gulf between the contractor, the other couple contractors, but it wasn't so massive that you could think that they actually blew their bid. But there are instances where you can see it, like what happened with me last fall, where it was clear. We all could see their math errors. We could all see that their bid was millions of dollars lower than the others. I think the bids came in at like 18 and 20 million, and this was like 12. I mean, it was huge difference. And we could tell it was a math error. Now, they could have snapped it up, and that would have been challenged potentially by what's called the snap-up rule, where the entity that bid the 12 million is like, wait a minute, you knew that we were so far apart. You were taking advantage of us. Yeah, we had a math error, and we didn't want to drop it. This isn't fair. So there are instances where the owner, if it's such a gross disparity, the owner can't take advantage of the contractor. That happens very rarely, though. So it has to be kind of just so in your face. Okay. That's it on competitive bidding. So let's now talk about the different forms. We're going to have a lot of little graphics and stuff I think you saw in the slides of the contracting methods. The first one is your traditional contracting method. Now here's our triangle. I've been talking about this all year. Here's the triangle. Owner, architect, contractor. Now, I've added a few more bubbles below because the architect is going to hire an electrical engineer and a mechanical engineer. And the contractor is going to hire an electrician, a plumber, and the door supplier. That's what these are. That's what these bubbles are. There's your traditional model. You're going to see this all the time. As I've said many times, each one of these lines, these hard lines, represents contractual obligations. You can see there is no line between architect and contractor or between these people, the lower tiers. This has no contractual obligation. Everyone else does. Make sense? Okay. So what are the advantages of the traditional method, the triangle that we talked about? It's the most common. So the marketplace is very comfortable with it. Everybody knows the lanes they're going to be swimming in. They stay in their lanes. Plans are usually complete prior to bidding of final pricing. You normally use this traditional method because the architect has gotten the plans to 90, 100% complete. So the bidding is fair. Everybody knows what it is. So that's a good thing. That's an advantage because you know what the pricing is going to be. And the architect remains independent. That's good for the architect. It's good for the owner. Those are all advantages of this model. What are the disadvantages? The disadvantage is there is very little to no input or communication between the contractor and the architect during the design phase. So as a result, the contractor comes in and is like, I build this stuff all the time. These crazy architects, they come up with these wacky angles and everything else. And you say to the owner, look, this is going to cost so much money to build. Had I been able to talk to your designer when he was doing this, we could have done it cheaper. It still would look the same. But now you want me to build it this way. I could maybe do some value engineering, we could figure out, but it's going to cost you more money just to fix it, or if you want me to build it the way you designed it, God forbid, it's going to cost you even more. So that's a disadvantage. Slower delivery time, because you're going to be doing traditional design, bid, build. So it's a very linear process. So from beginning when you hire the architect to end when you start making those toys is a longer period of time in your traditional method. Adversary relationship between the general contractor and the architect engineer. I talked a little bit about that before. So we have the lump sum pricing model creates an adversary relationship. And then this triangle creates the adversary relationship because there's no partnership between the contractor and the architect. They are independent of each other. So the benefit of the independence can also have the reciprocal as it creates the adversary relationship. Another disadvantage, price competition, reduced profits or render some projects unobtainable. So there may be some problems with how you go out and bid it because you're not really sure of the pricing. And then claims contractors and truthful bidding. Sometimes you're going to have a project where a claims contractor is a contractor that will always come in with the lowest bid. They know how to bid it, so it looks like they got everything covered, but they're really smart. And they say, this area of the drawing's a little shaky. This area of the program's a little questionable. And for every one of those spots, these contractors are really good at figuring out how to write a change order. This isn't exactly going to cost you more money. So a claims contractor, and I've had to litigate a lot of them, they start writing letters on day one. And they paper the file, and paper the file, and paper the file, and paper the file, and the price goes up and up and up and up and up. And so even though they came in at the low bid, they make more money on change orders. So that's something you got to be careful when you're dealing with this traditional separation between owner, architect, and contractor in the traditional model, the separation. And then the claims contractor also comes in truth in bidding. Is their bid really accurate? Or have they held back to get the lowest responsible bid, knowing that they're going to claim it out through change orders later? So those are some of the disadvantages. Next, developer as a prime model. So now we have developers all the time that are out there. And the developer has a situation like this, where you have an owner. The owner is a company that builds condos. And they're going to create a branch that is a developer. So it's the owner with the money. Okay, have you guys been reading in the paper like the Lincoln Yards? That's going to be up. Okay, that's huge in the paper right now, and it's just getting about ready to hopefully go through hopefully depending on what side you are on the coin, the last, I think it's got one last vote in the city council to go through. Sterling Properties is the entity that will be developing it, but there is an owner behind. The owners of the Sterling Bay Company, is that will be the owner. So you have the owner, and then you have the developer, the entity that actually develops it. It's the developer that enters into the contract with these two people. It creates the same triangle, but the owner is one level above. So that's another contracting method that comes into place. This is common. They'll create for this developer role single-purpose LLC. So for every single project, they're going to stick in this developer entity. They're going to put in a different company. It insulates them. Remember we talked about LLCs. It insulates the owner from liability if there's a problem on that project for other projects going on. So every single project will have a different middle person on that. Does that make sense? Okay. Next model. Fast tracking. Now fast tracking is a delivery of how to get the project done more quickly. You can do fast tracking in various ways. You can do it as a CM at risk. You can do it as a design build. But fast tracking is just what it says. How do we make the project get done faster? Because time is money. So this graphic shows. The top is your traditional. Owner hires a designer, and they design it, and they bring it out to, we're almost 100% finished with the design. There's like the final tweaks. And then it goes out to bid, and then you take a little bit of time to bid, and you get a contractor, and then it gets built, and it takes all the way over to here. So that's your linear process. Fast tracking, you start with the design, and they get the foundation drawings done, they get the concrete, they get the steel, they're getting into carpentry, the layout of the building, and they get enough information in the design that the architect is preparing that they go out for bid. And they bid and price it, and as they bid it, you can hire then a contractor. And you hire the contractor long before the design is complete. But the contractor has enough information from how far this design is along that the contractor can say, I can build your project for X. And so as it moves along, it gets finished earlier. And this may be a series of months, or who knows, it could be a year. Because you've spent, depending on how long the project is, but your project comes online earlier. You start making toys in the toy factory faster. You move into your house quicker. The hospital opens earlier in this. And the reason why we have both bid pricing and bid pricing is because as the design, so this bid and pricing is based on where the design is here, kind of the beginning of it here. The architect keeps designing. As more stuff comes in, the contractor can go out to bid more. So there's more packages. But that contractor should be sophisticated enough to say, I kind of have a good idea of what the costs are for the second set of bids, so I'm going to tell you in the beginning how much it's going to cost to do that. One of the projects I have going underway now is it's a design build, which uses the fast track methodology. In the design build, both these entities would be the same color because they're the same company. But we're doing even more fast track, even more accelerated. And what's going to happen is the construction's going to start even earlier because there are certain packages and because there's multiple buildings and multiple pieces to this complex. And so they're going to sequence it so some of the pieces will be done complete. Some of the buildings on this facility will be completed before the final design is actually completed for the entire project because it's a long, extended 5 to 6 year project, and so there's going to be this model will be compressed even more, but it'll probably shave anywhere between a year to 18 months off the project had they done it traditional method. And if you think about a year to 18 months on a massive project and the linear portions of that, the cost to have people on board, even just to have the general contractor on board for the extra 18 months could be millions. So, advantages, delivery speed and the complete project. Disadvantage, it's more difficult to control and the cost estimating is harder because they don't have everything in hand. But that's why you go out and you get sophisticated contractors when you're fast tracking. Good contractors should know. I know that if you're going to have this facility and this, by the time we get to here, you're going to know how many offices and bathrooms and bedrooms or whatever it's going to be. Contractor kind of should be able to ballpark what those are. That's what they do for a living. So, any questions on fast tracking? Next is called multi-prime. Multi-prime is a different delivery. Multi-prime is something that I've had a few owner clients do it. I've told every one of them not to, and they still want to because we do construction all the time. We've built these big projects. We've done it. We've had our team in place. We have really good people, and they're correct. They've done lots of construction. They've had lots of good people on their teams and everything else. But most of the time, owners are not general contractors. So while they see how the process works, they're involved in it. We've built 7 of these, Mike. We know what we're doing. We're just going to cut the middleman out. And that's what the multi-prime does. It cuts out that general contractor. So you don't see any contractor here. What happens is the owner enters into a contractor with the plumber, the electrician, the concrete guy, the window supplier, the door supplier, the owner's rep. The owner enters into contracts with every single one of them. So on a multi-prime contract, you may have the owner entering into 50 contracts, just like the general contractor would. The owner is the general contractor in a multi-prime. The owner is responsible for coordinating everything. The owner is its own general. You guys ever heard of Bally Total Fitness? The health club facility? I don't even know if they're around anymore, but I represented them many, many years ago when they were like going gangbusters. They were building health club facilities like all over the country. It was amazing how many they were doing. And a lot of them they found themselves in like malls, like they would put them in a mall or in established, as opposed to a freestanding building. They didn't do a lot of freestanding. They took a lot of spaces where they would just plug in. And they had done, in 1 year, I think they did like 14. So that's a lot. And all over the country. And they came to me and they said, and they had a really good construction staff. And they had their architects. They had a set series of architects that they used over and over. There was like 5 of them across the country. And they were good. And so we were locked in with those. And they came to me and they're like, okay, they had one going out in Seattle. We're going to do this multi-prime. And I told them, don't do it multi-prime. I go, they're based out of here. They were right up by O'Hare with their offices. I don't do it multi-prime because do you know the market? Have you had people out there? Like, no, but we have a really good construction manager that works West Coast and everything else. And they multi-primed it, and it was a mess. Because the nuances of just hiring a contractor that's local in the area, the benefits you get from them knowing, well, if this electrician is going south, if you don't like the work the electrician does, the local general contractor will know 3 other electricians that can sub in. There's all these things you can go wrong. But it's a method that happens. Some entities can do it, some not. So, there is no role for the general contractor. Owner carries all contractors directly. And there may be legal reasons for this contracting methodology. They may have both in-house legal issues. There are just various ones that come in. You don't need to worry about it, but there are sometimes reasons why an owner will want to do multi-prime, but I don't recommend it. Owners rarely are able to successfully manage and coordinate the project because that's not their business. They are not contractors. They are health companies. They are hospitals. They are whatever they are. They're drugstores. They're fast food restaurant chains. If you think about it, like Chick-fil-A are building all over the country. They're probably one of the fastest growing fast food restaurants right now. Theirs are pretty standardized boxes. They have the same set of designs and everything else. They don't multi-prime. They go out and hire a local general contractor to build the next Chick-fil-A. So, owners are responsible. They're liable for the management and coordination of the problems during the project. So if anything goes wrong, you can't point at somebody else. You carry that cost. And so it's time and management. So those are issues with multi-prime. Any questions on that? Next, construction manager. I've mentioned construction manager a couple times. I said we get to it and I'll explain to what it is. Think of a construction manager as a general contractor plus. Okay? So in your traditional model, the general contractor has no design responsibilities and comes in separate and independent of the architect. The drawings may be finished or not, but by and large, the general contractor comes in when the drawings are complete. And so the general contractor's responsibility is to hire the trades and build the building. And that's it. Construction manager, the plus, is the construction manager gets involved a little bit earlier. A construction manager during the design process will meet with the owner and the designers and think about different ideas of constructability, of value engineering. So the construction manager will have a pre-construction phase, and they're going to offer services whereby it helps the owner deliver a better project at the end. So they're not designing necessarily. They're not taking the role of designer, but they are adding input. They are helping to manage earlier the costs that the owner will see. It creates this team. And so what you're going to often see is the GMP contracts that we're talking about, guaranteed maximum price, and fast track contracts will be using a construction manager as opposed to your traditional general contractor. The other very small nuance is that construction managers almost never perform their own work. They are a manager of all the trades. A general contractor may have a drywall division or a concrete division or a carpentry division. And so sometimes the general contractor will self-perform. By and large, a construction manager does not self-perform. So, what does the model look like? There are two different types of construction manager. Actually three, but two that are most common. You have a construction manager in the agency model, and the next one we're going to show you is called a construction manager at risk. So I'll explain the difference between the two. So here, construction manager agency, the construction manager does not carry any of these contracts. Construction manager is an entity that's going to be advising and assisting the owner. Sometimes they are often called an owner's rep. Now, here, this is set up, the bubbles here are set up as a multi-prime, where the owner has entered directly into contracts with them. But the owner, in this instance, listened to me and realized even though they have a really good in-house construction staff, they don't have the skill set to fully manage a construction project. So what the owner has is in every one of the contracts the owner has entered into, there'll be language that says, you will follow instructions from my construction manager. They're going to be acting as my agent. And for this type of setup, this construction manager as an agent effectively acts like the general contractor in coordinating everybody and working schedules and everything else. But it doesn't carry the liabilities of the risk the owner does here. So, construction manager and agent is retained to manage the construction, payment process, schedule, walking the project. Will not enter into agreements with the trade contractors. Always separate. They're an on-site observer. They're similar to an architect's role, but more. Time and cost management. So sometimes they're, like I said, sometimes they're called owner's reps. I have a project right now where the owner, they're hesitant to hire a separate construction manager because they have the design team in place and a very good design team, and the design team is going to provide on-site services. They're going to walk the project site. They're going to make sure the project is being built in accordance with the plans and specs. They're going to do the payment application. So they're going to do those roles that are identified in the B101, the architect is. And the owner's concerned about having too many cooks, and they're concerned with upper management of hiring yet a third, because they're going to have the architect, and you're going to have a contractor, and the contractor's going to be managing schedule and budget, and architect's going to be helping with that. They're worried if they bring in a third entity that management is going to say, why are you bringing in these additional costs? Shouldn't the architect be able to do all that work? Why do you need to bring in this construction manager as an agent or an owner's rep? My pitch to them, to the client, and we haven't gotten, the project hasn't started yet. The construction won't start for quite some time. So we have time to get to what I think is the best solution here. But the pitch is, the architect can do this stuff. But what happens if the architect screws up? Who's going to be the watchdog for the architect? If the architect had an error in its drawings or made an error in its estimate or its schedule estimates, all those things, and the contractor raises its hand and says, drawings aren't any good, this is going to cost more, and you're looking to the architect to be the contractor watchdog, by nature, the architect's going to be like, my drawings were fine. It's the contractor. And that may not be true. So this construction manager as an agent, its role, while in this image doesn't have the architect, its role also is to be the watchdog for the architect, to make sure that the project has been handled properly. It's your neutral. So that's one type of construction manager as an agent. Any questions on that? Did I go too far? Okay. The next most common is construction manager at risk. Now, the construction manager at risk is kind of like the triangle again. But in here, as I said, they act like a general contractor, but they're involved earlier. So you have your owner on one side, you have your architecture and design team, and on the other side, you have your construction team. And your construction manager at risk, meaning they are carrying the liability. When it's a construction manager as an agent, that CM is not in agreement with any of the trades, but a construction manager at risk is. So, CM works with the owner for pricing and securing subcontractors. So they bring in the subcontractors and they work on pricing, communicating with the architect about how to do it quicker and cheaper. After the CM agreement is executed, the CM essentially becomes a general contractor. So once they're in, once they have started, and this should probably say not after it's executed, but executed and or after pre-construction services. After the construction starts, after the project actually starts to be built, then the CM is kind of more like a general contractor because any of their input in pre-construction and integration and working with the design team and the owner team has already been brought in. But the most important thing here is CM at risk is liable for management and coordination and problems during the construction because it, as you see, has the connected line with these various entities. So the construction manager at risk contractually feels like a general contractor. Construction manager and agent is this kind of separate neutral that doesn't have the risk involved. Does that make sense? Okay. Next slide is a graphic of kind of where the risk models do, and there's one more CM on here. This is an advisory CM. So this may be, if you had a question earlier on, like, this could be an advisory construction manager or owner's rep. They may help in ideas of how the project should be put together. They're going to be very, very early on. They're more of a consultant than anything else. We had a project where we brought in a preliminary consultant that was doing investigations on how the project should be phased. It was a hospital. And we brought in a consultant that said, okay, you want to do this new wing and you want to have these various elements and how's it going to interface with this ongoing and existing hospital? Because they couldn't shut the hospital down to build this addition in this wing. It was actually a full building, a freestanding building. So they brought in a consultant, and that would be the advisory CM. They are much earlier in the process. Agency, their risk model is moderate, and they coordinate and manage. They do coordination, so they have some risk, but they're not in contract with the contractor. So where the agency CM comes into play, they're supposed to make sure the schedule works properly. If the schedule gets screwed up, the owner can point the fingers at an agency CM and say, the delays are due to your failure of properly managing schedule. So they do carry some risk, but they don't carry risk if the electrician installed something improperly. The agency CM is not responsible for that risk and that error. What they're responsible for is coordinating the entities and schedule. And the last is CM at risk. Their risks are basically the same as a general contractor. They carry it all. Their schedule, coordination, if the work is crappy, if there's problems on the job site, the CM at risk carries all of that. Okay? All right. Next model. Design build. Kind of the big payoff at the end here that we've been talking about over and over. So how does design build work? Well, the first is real simple. There's no triangle. We have the owner, the design builder. One-stop shopping. You go to the entity, they cover everything. Pretty simple. Sometimes the design builder will be design-led design builder. Sometimes there will be contractor-led design builder. Sometimes there will be a mutual joint venture. It all depends on how this entity formed its company. Who was the one, the impetus to create this? Was it a contractor? Was it an architect? Was it an architect that wanted to get into construction? So the owner picks the design builder based on whatever qualifications they like, but who's the leader of the pack is based on what the design builder has decided. So there are different relationships with how design build teams work. They're all different models within how a design build is structured. So you have an integrated company. That's a company that they are out there specifically to do design build. That's what they do. You're going to find this a lot in residential. One of my clients does mid to high level residential houses. So his houses, I think he does, I don't know if he does anything for less than $1 million. He doesn't do anything more than $5 million. He's in that wheelhouse. He's an architect. And he's a contractor. And that's all he does. He doesn't hire architects to do outside. He's got a couple of draftsmen on his team, on his staff. He doesn't hire anybody to manage the construction. He's got some people on his staff. It's an integrated company. So there's not a merger of two. There's not one leading the other. It's an integrated design build company. Contractors are prime as the AE is a sub. That's where you're going to have, say, Turner Construction, and they want to go out and they want to build. They're going to be in the design build competition for a new baseball stadium. Well, they're going to go up and they're going to call HOK. HOK, one of the best designers in the country for doing sports facilities. And they're going to say, Turner's going to say to HOK, hey, the Cleveland Indians are going to be doing a new baseball stadium. We want to get this bid. How about we join together? We'll be the lead and we're going to hire you. We're not going to be a joint venture. You're going to be hired by us, but we're going to be presenting as the Turner HOK team. Contractor is prime. AE is sub. Next. Engineer. Architect engineer. Sorry. Because sometimes you're going to have a design build competition that it's not going to be for architecture. It's going to be for like a process facility or something where the prime is going to be an engineer, like a Jacobs Engineering. They don't do architecture, they do engineering. And for those types of projects, like if Jacobs is the lead engineer, they may actually, but let's say it's a process facility, but there's going to have to be the front office. Well, Jacobs may actually hire an architect even underneath them to design the architecture part, but the majority of the project is engineering. So, okay. AE is prime, Contractors is sub. HOK comes to Gilbane and says, hey, I want to get in on the new Florida Marlins Stadium or whatever it might be. And HOK is the lead. And they are the ones and says, we are going to hire Gilbane, not a joint venture, not an LLC at the same level. Gilbane, the contractor, is underneath us. You are going to find between the split between AE prime and contractor prime, it's about 70 to 80% contractor prime. And the reason there's two. Number one, the bulk of the work on any project is the construction. So, of course, the contractors feel more comfortable doing that. Number two, the bulk of the risk, because the construction is the bulk of the work, is on the construction aspect of it. So the companies that need to carry that risk have to have the capital. Construction firms are traditionally worth significantly more and can carry more capital risks than an architecture firm. But you do get architectural firms like HOK and others that say, we're big, we're national, we can carry risk, and so we're going to be the lead. And it's nice. I like it when an AE is lead because the design is thought forward. It's not thinking about how can I build this the most cheaply. It's how can we work with our contracting entity and build the best facility. Next model. AE is prime, multiple trade subs retained. So this is kind of like, instead of hiring a Gilbane, I kind of multi-prime it out. So it's like one of those other bubble diagrams. But the AE is prime. Design builder prime. That's my guy that builds the $1 to $5 million house. They're the prime. They're going to enter into a contract with you. But maybe maybe as the part of that project, the owner says, you know what, I want in my $5 million house a really cool room that's for an aquarium. I want a 600-gallon tank and a facility and a structure and a living reef and all this other stuff. Something special. Well, my guy can't design that, so he's going to hire a specialty AE and contractor. So that's how this company is going to be. So it's a multiple integrated company. They may hire specialty people for specialty work. Sometimes you'll find this in restaurants or hotels where there's an element that's specialty. So that integrated design build company that's kind of the one stop says, I can do this for you, but for your little unique aspect, I'm going to bring in another part of my team. And then joint venture between AE and contractor. So instead of where you have these first two as a prime, where HOK is under Turner or Gilbane is under HOK, with a joint venture, they are both equal levels. They are on the same level. So you don't have one as leading the charge or a prime. The result of a joint venture is then both are equally liable if something goes wrong. So what you have to have between HOK and Turner is a trust, because both will be responsible for the problems of the other. Okay? Does that make sense? All right. So here's your multiple integrated company that I said. So here's my guy that builds houses. He's the design builder, one-stop shop. And he hires the aquarium designer and the aquarium builder. You guys seen those guys? I don't know if it's, or maybe like my kids, they love watching DIY. If you guys watch DIY or any of those HTGs, they love, what's his name, the Pool Kings. Have you seen this guy? So he builds these massive pools. They are huge with these waterfalls and everything else. And these things are like $4 and $5 million. These amazing. So my kids love the Pool Kings. So my guy, my design builder would build you the $5 million house and hire the Pool Kings to design and build it. So that's how that would work. And that multi-integrated. You got to check it out sometime, the Pool Kings. And there's an aquarium one. I can't remember the name of that company. I mentioned the Florida Marlins. They actually, there's in the Florida Marlins Stadium, I think it's on the first base side, right along the wall, I don't know if it's before or after, I think it's after the dugout, built into the wall of the first, right on the ground level, it's like 60 or 70 feet long, is an aquarium. It's all plexiglass in, and so, it's right there you can see, which is kind of amazing inside a ballpark. Anyway, they did that. Okay, multiple integrated company. So here is you have a joint venture design affiliate and you have a joint venture construction affiliate. So what this is you got this joint venture design affiliate. Here you have multiple designers coming together to do the design and each have a specialty, and you have multiple contractors doing the specialty. This is how we did Navy Pier. Navy Pier, when they renovated Navy Pier, as I said, used James Corner Field Architects. They were the ones that, their landscape, or James Corner Field Operations, JCFO. James Corner is a landscape architect, but on his staff also have regular traditional architects. But there was lots and lots of stuff. There was roadway work, there was underground work, there was lots of things that had to be done that was designed that JCFO didn't do. So they created a joint venture, and they also had subcontractors. There were 14 designers, 14 different firms on this side of the JV design affiliate for them. Some were in the JV of the JCFO, and some were subs, so there was a combination. But on this side, 14 entities. On this side, there was like 4 on the contractor. We had the construction manager that had 2 different branches, and they had some other ones on here. So this is how a design-build multi-prime process would work here, or a multi-integration process would work here. There also is a connection, you can see here, between the 2 joint venture affiliates. That connection allows for the integration of the design-build portion, that they can communicate back and forth, as opposed to I'm a separate contractor and I'm a separate design branch. For Navy Pier, while we had these multiple here, we didn't have this connection here, which became a problem later on. There was a separation between that. Okay. Advantages of design build. Speed of project delivery. As you saw that fast tracking, it shrinks everything down. Owner can look to design builder for single point responsibility. I only need to go to one entity. I don't need to go to a contractor, an architect. They don't fight with each other. They just go to you. Problem, you fix it. Obtain cost certainty earlier with better results. Because the contractor and the designer are working together, they can figure out what it's going to cost faster. Better communication of design intent from the design arm to the constructing arm. They're talking earlier. They know how to build it. There's better communication. There's not an adversarial relationship because they're the one entity. Less litigation and disputes. There's not going to be contractor pointing at architect, architect pointing back, and figuring out otherwise. You're going to have less disputes, less fights and litigation when you have a design build. The flip side also is if there is litigation, the owner with the single point responsibility only has to sue one entity, only has to go after one. Greater control of information because there's no hiding the ball. Architects not trying to do, I don't know if I have it in here, defensive designing. They're not trying to protect themselves. Contractors not trying to paper the file and say the architect screwed up. Negotiated pricing. You can get into better negotiations because the contractor and the designer are working together, so how they price out with their trades is better. And then the AE, the architect, engineer, and the general contractor are not adverse to each other. Those are some of the advantages. Disadvantages. Loss of an architect as an independent decision maker or policing body in the project. That trust that you have with your contractor, if it gets eroded, if you feel the contractor is shorting you, you could, in the traditional model, you always call your architect up and say, hey, go out and see what's going on the project site. They're your watchdog. You've lost that when you only are dealing with design build because they're going to protect each other's back. So you've lost some of that policing ability. That's sometimes when you hire that agency CM to be your watchdog. Okay? Pricing may be suspect depending on when the fast tracking took place. If the bids come in too early and the contractor bids or the design build comes in before the program is really fleshed out, then you're not quite sure. So getting the price certainty early is a benefit, but sometimes price certainty may not be as clear as what you want. So the price certainty, it depends on where it goes. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad. There may be more of an economic risk depending on the design builder entity. You go with the Gilbane-HOK relationship, you probably are in a good shape because they've been around for a long time. But if you go with mom and pop and brother and sister entity that have come together and they've never worked together, and it's a brand new design build entity for this project alone, you don't know how that marriage is going to work and you're stuck with that. So as an owner, you want to do some of your homework. What's the history between that design build entity so I'm not carrying their economic problems? And then finally, who's the back check for the owner? That goes back up on this first one as far as loss of policing body. You can bring in an owner's rep or a CM as an agent to help you with that partially. I think we have a couple more slides and we're done. The differences between the architect design phase services. Okay, so when you're design build, what's the differences between your traditional model, the phasing, and the design build? What happens differently? Why are they? We know that they're faster, but what does the architect do differently when it's design build versus the traditional design bid build? So with the design build, you do a system-by-system design with what I call looping feedback. So if you think about it, if I'm doing the traditional design, bid, build, I'm going to design the whole project. And all the systems will be in there, foundations, electrical, plumbing. And I don't have to necessarily design them in any order, any sequence. I can start out with a kind of plan, and I can figure it out, and I can fill in the blanks as I go along, because my designs aren't going to go out to bid for a contractor until they're finished. So I can do it in any order I want. Now, as you guys are learning, and you'll continue to learn when you go out and work in the industry, there are going to be some traditional logical steps of what you do in order anyway when you're designing a space, regardless of what model you're in. But by and large, you don't have any mandate if it's design, bid, build. If you're in design build, the whole point is to get it done faster and quicker. So you need to design foundation, excavation, and steel first. Then plumbing, then electrical, or carpentry. However, the sequencing is now mandated by how the project is going to be built. So you have the system, so you design it by system instead of by the entire project. But the looping feedback, what I call here is the communication of your construction arm giving you feedback. Okay, that looks good, your design makes sense, but have you tried this? So, the systems are designed semi-independently, meaning they have some integration, but you have to make sure that the packages are delivered. And each system is constantly modified by feedback from the construction team, this looping feedback. That makes the project constructability better, which brings down costs, which gives more certainty to the owner. So that's one of the things. That's the difference. You don't have any looping feedback with the traditional method. You just get the complaints later on. You didn't draw it. Here's another thing that's different. Informal communications between contractor and design arms eliminate the need for defensive detailing, which means you don't have to, on the design side, over-detail. If you got a window detail and a door detail, and you have done this over and over and over with your constructing partner, you don't have to draw it in detail. You don't have to make your drawings so verbose, because your contracting team knows how to build it, number one, and if they have questions, they're going to come back to you. So I'm not to say that the drawings are less complete, because they have to meet a minimum standard anyway, but there's not this, what, like I said, defensive detailing. You don't have to worry about protecting yourself by over-designing or over-drawing so that the contractor is back there to complain. Greater incentive to explore alternate design concepts. You know, even though this is an integrated company or a partnership or a joint venture, you're still going to have your contracting branch and your creative branch, your design branch. And so sometimes, as we all know on the creative side, we have these kind of wild ideas. And the contractor's like, are you freaking kidding me? We can't build this. So there's this communication, though. But the contractor may be more readily exploring an alternative design to give the solution of the creative branch because they know how to build stuff. And so you get these different solutions, which is kind of a nice thing. And the benefit of that, the owner benefits from that. Better price, more creative, different ideas. So that's a nice thing, too. Here, MEP, this is mechanical, electrical, mechanical like HVAC systems, mechanical, electrical, and plumbing. And FP, this is furniture plans or fixture plans, fixture and lighting. These are only going to be schematic. You don't have to get into the detailed drawings. You don't have to get your detailed design engineer, because if you think about it, the electrical is going to have the electrical subcontractor do its shop drawings, but they're all in the same house. So this is really going to be help streamline your drawings, make things go faster. All of these translate into speed, and time is money in construction. So these are all different, and different than how the process works for you as a traditional. Last slide of differences, and then we're done. There's greater than usual pricing constraints and price inputs. That's another difference. So when you have, in your traditional model, what happens is the design is specific, and it says you can only use in this one bandwidth. There's going to be actually specifications that the architect draws that says contractor can only bid this or equal, and then there's a definition of what's equal. And so the contractor is limited to who they can go out and bid this brick or this type of concrete or this type of whatever it is. So the contractor in the traditional model is restricted than when they're in this design build. In the design build, they can work with each other to figure out what solves the program and the owner's problem without the constraints. The out-of-sequence provision of design details to meet the contractor's need. Out-of-sequence provision of design details to meet contractor's need. So in the traditional in the design traditional model, sometimes packages will come out of sequence. as the architect finishes things up. Here, you know you have to design in sequence because you're sending those out to bid as the project is going to be built. So the need for pricing the project requires you to design in sequence, as opposed to how it might be with your normal traditional method, which would be designing necessarily out of sequence. And then there's going to be in the design build process here, there's going to be a heavier usual reliance on performance specs. A performance spec says it will perform to the standard. It's not going to detail it. So, there's going to be, instead of detailing the size of the ductwork and the size of the furnace and all this other stuff, it's going to say there needs to be an air return rate of so many cubic feet of air per minute. That's the performance spec that's going to be designed, and the contractor can then work with it to try to figure out what ultimately will be the actual duct size or the furnace size, and that happens simultaneously. So you can do performance specs in your design build, whereas if it's traditional, the architect has to say, you want to use this and this and this. Okay? Any questions?
So with the point about the you don't need to do tons of detailing or anything.
Yes.
If something is messed up, who's liable?
Well, see, as far as the owner's concerned, the design builder. And what happens is the owner, as a single entity. Now, what sometimes happens, and this depends on if there's a prime or other prime. So let's say you have the Turner prime and HOK is a subcontractor. If HOK screws up the design, the owner's not in a contract with HOK. The owner's in contract with Turner. But Turner, in the contract between owner and Turner has provisions that says, I, Turner, will make sure that the designs are correct. So even though HOK is a subcontractor, owner sues Turner for failure to properly design. And then Turner sues HOK. So you only worry about going one person. But on the HOK side and the Turner side, they are able to fight it out between themselves, whether it's a prime and a sub relationship or a joint venture. Whatever their agreement says between each other will delineate how they fight and how they carry those liabilities. But as far as the owner's concerned, they just look to the design build prime as a one-stop shop. So, yeah. And you're going to find, like, I have a big project right now where it is contractor-led. The architect is and all the architect subcontractors are all subs. But we are very clear as to the responsibilities of this prime entity. It's a LLC that they have created for this project. And so the LLC is carrying all the risk and the weight. So, anybody else? Okay, next week is, I think, economics of construction. That's actually even shorter. It should be less than 2 hours for next week, and then you guys will break, and then we'll do the tool when we get back. All right? Thank you.